fishermen on the Andrea Gail.
The Andrea Gail was lost in the perfect storm. The ship and her 6-man crew left Gloucester Harbor and were never seen again.
The last trip the Andrea Gail made, I did transfer them fuel.
Six young men set out on a dead calm sea with Andrea Gail to seek their fortunes. On their way home, a massive wave swept Andrea Gail away, causing them to lose connection. Despite extensive searches by the U.S. Coast Guard and international authorities, no trace of the Andrea Gail or its crew was ever found. This is the tragic story of Andrea Gail lost at sea. In the early 1990s, during a devastating storm called the Perfect Storm, the commercial fishing vessel Andrea Gail and its brave crew became famous. Captain Robert "Bobby" Brown, who had bought the ship in 1986 and named it after his daughter, led the crew in their daring fishing expeditions. The Andrea Gail, a dependable and robust ship just over 70 feet long, was famous for delivering massive catches of swordfish and tuna from the dangerous North Atlantic. The ship, originally named the Miss Penny, was a testament to resilience. Constructed in 1978 in Nova Scotia, Canada, it was sold and renamed the Andrea Gail after joining the fleet of the Jamaica Swordfishing Fishing Company. The Andrea Gail, a classic fishing vessel, could take up to 10 knots thanks to her strong diesel engine and wooden hull, a testament to her enduring strength. The Andrea Gail, with its stern and rustic look, had a worn exterior and tight cabin, reflecting the challenging lifestyle of the crew. The main deck held the fish hold, which kept the catch, engine room, and wheelhouse. The wheelhouse on the top deck allowed the captain and crew to oversee the ship's navigation and monitor weather conditions. The ship also contained a tiny galley and sleeping accommodations for the crew, which, though simple and sometimes unpleasant, were the crew's home during their long and arduous fishing trips. Gloucester is over 400 years old and has a rich maritime history. The first settlers were men from an English vessel who decided to stay instead of returning home after fishing nearby in the Atlantic. Gloucester fishermen were found fishing in wooden sailboats as far away as Cape Sable in Nova Scotia. Despite her structure, the Andrea Gail was a ship that, while meeting safety regulations, lacked the most advanced weather tracking technologies and radio equipment. This vulnerability would prove fatal when the ship encountered the perfect storm. The storm had claimed the lives of many fishermen, including at least 4,000 Gloucester men who perished in their pursuit of fortune. The 6 men were the next to experience the unexpected as they were filled with anticipation and hope. The Andrea Gail, a vessel of remarkable capabilities, can sail huge distances and spend extended periods at sea. This ship, a testament to the crew's unwavering bravery and determination, will fish over 1,000 miles away at the Grand Banks, a shallow area 90 miles southeast of Newfoundland, where warm water from the Gulf Stream meets cold water from the Labrador Sea. Swordfish feed in shallow waters, which makes them popular with Gloucester fishermen. The crew carried enough supplies for a 40 to 50-day trip and planned to land a catch that would test their skills and earn them a substantial reward, as much as $500,000 profit. Little did the crew know they were sailing into one of the most influential and destructive storms to hit the North Atlantic. The perfect storm, a terrifying convergence of 3 weather systems, unleashed massive waves and hurricane-force winds, a force of nature beyond their comprehension. Despite their best efforts, Andrea Gail's crew was unprepared for the storm, underestimating the magnitude of the impending disaster. Like their fellow fishermen, Andrea Gail's 6-man crew were driven by a strong desire to provide for their families. They yearned for a quick trip, aiming to secure their catch, return to port, and reunite with their loved ones, filling their wallets with the fruits of their labor. Each day spent fishing without success was another day battling the harsh, unforgiving seas of the Atlantic. The Andrea Gail, a robust and well-equipped vessel, was their trusted companion, always prepared for a lengthy journey. It carried hundreds of kilometers of monofilament line, thousands of fishing hooks, and 10,000 pounds of bait. It was equipped with 7 life preservers, 6 survival suits, a life raft, and an emergency beacon, a testament to their commitment to safety. It should have been able to withstand any storm. Its owner, Bob Brown, nicknamed Suicide Brown by the locals because of the daring risks he took as a young fisher, such as venturing out amid a storm to secure a good catch, had taken the Andrea Gail on dozens of excursions before, and this one was shaping up to be no exception for its new crew. On September 20th, 1991, the 6-man crew embarked aboard the Andrea Gail. They were led by the young and fearless Captain Frank "Billy" Tyne, a seasoned sailor who had braved numerous storms with a mix of experience and courage crew. Each member, be it David Sullivan, Alfred Pierre, Bobby Shatford, Dale Murphy, or Michael "Bugsy" Moran, brought their unique skills and experiences to the table. The Andrea Gail was meticulously prepared for its voyage, with 2 additional fuel tanks strategically placed at the ship's stern. These tanks, carrying an extra 3,800 gallons of fuel, were in addition to the 2 original 1,000 G fuel tanks in the engine room. This careful planning ensured the ship had enough fuel to navigate the deep sea. The vessel also has 30 additional fuel drums stored on deck, 2,000 gallons of drinking water stored in the ship's integrated water tanks, and 10 extra 55-gallon plastic drums of drinking water stored on deck. With the additional fuel, carrying extra drums of fuel and water isn't unusual for a ship like this. But the Andrea Gail was heavily loaded. Sailing was slow in the water, but it continued the fact that these men hoped to return home with lots of swordfish and preferably huge amounts of cash. It took a week to reach the Grand Banks, but they immediately started casting their lines. The crew works all hours when fishing. They spend their evenings late into the night baiting their lines with up to 1,000 hooks by hand and putting out as many as 40 miles of line. It takes until midnight to set the line. Still, they would do that, then wake at 4 to bring it back. Bringing the 40M line was too much work, and a swordfish weighing up to 1,000 had to be dragged onto the ship with hooks. The crew's days were filled with physically demanding tasks. They butchered and iced the fish, organized the fishing gear, and ensured the boat ran smoothly. They also found time to cook, eat, and shower. They set the line again as midnight approached, baiting it precisely so the cycle continued. The crew's anticipation for a bountiful catch grew as the ship entered the sea. However, luck was off their side that day despite their best efforts at the Grand Banks. The fish they hoped to catch was not what they saw, leaving them disappointed. The crew decided to change plans and sail the Andrea Gail towards the east of an area of the North Atlantic called the Flemish Cap. This is another area of relatively shallow water popular with swordfish. The worst part was that Andrea Gail had a malfunctioning ice machine. Without the ice, the catch would go bad and have to be thrown out or sold for a reduced price. The ship must stay out longer and catch more fish to compensate for the loss. So Tyne sailed towards the Flemish Cap to provide him with the huge catch he sought. After days of hard work and perseverance, Tyne's luck finally turned out well. Andrea Gail's fish hold was filled to the brim with a whopping 40,000 pounds of fish, valued at over $160,000. With their mission accomplished, Tyne turned the ship and began the journey back home, which would take a week. Despite the challenge of a malfunctioning ice machine, they were determined to preserve their hard-earned catch, and their hearts were filled with satisfaction and accomplishment. The majority of the other fleets were still fishing hundreds of miles to the east when Tyne signaled the Canadian Coast Guard on the afternoon of October 27th to inform them that his boat was in Canadian territorial waters. He had no idea that a massive storm was forming to the south. Tyne was unaware that Hurricane Grace, which formed near Bermuda on October 27th, had shifted northeast. The 3 distinct weather systems were on a perfectly aligned crash path during one of the century's most unusual meteorological occurrences. A Great Lakes storm system, which goes to the east, a Canadian cold front to the south, and Hurricane Grace moving northeast were all heading into the North Atlantic. Throughout the way, the storm would unleash monster waves, beat ships, and trigger coastal flooding throughout the eastern United States coast. Tyne's radio conversation with his fellow captains was the last thing anyone heard from Andrea Gail. Their previous transmission position was 113 nautical miles east of Sable Island. No one knows precisely which direction Andrea Gail was headed. The storm's speed increased, becoming a Category 2 hurricane approaching Andrea Gail. However, the centers of the northern storm and the hurricane were separated by a large distance, moving toward each other. Remember that Andrea Gail is already experiencing what seamen would call challenging sea conditions. This weather phenomenon only occurs every 50 to 100 years. For days, the Andrea Gail fought the North Atlantic's severe gusts and towering waves, with its crew working rapidly to bring in their nets and withstand the storm. But as the weather worsened, the ship's situation became more terrible. The persistent hammering of the waves took a toll on the ancient ship, testing its seaworthiness and the crew's fortitude. The hurricane storms converged, their varying temperatures and conditions, creating a pressure gradient with ferocious winds and massive waves. The perfect storm was forming right over Andrea Gail, a testament to the raw power of nature. On the 30th of October, Hurricane Grace and the northern storm merged into one superstorm, with sea wind speeds over 50 knots and gusts up to 65 knots. The weather boys reported enormous wave heights, between 9 and 12 m, a staggering size interspersed with even larger and towering rogue waves. These waves, capable of capsizing even the sturdiest ships, posed a significant threat to the Andrea Gail. A colleague 264 miles south of Halifax, Nova Scotia away, reported a wave of 30.7 m, the giant wave ever recorded on the oceanic shelf of Nova Scotia. Just a 30 mm wave could quickly turn the 22 m Andrea Gail. Waves breaking over the ship's top could flood the deck because it was heavily loaded with a total catch, fuel, and water supplies, which made the Andrea Gail sail perilously low in the water. The raised port bulwark, elevated by 1 m, could trap more water on the deck, further increasing the ship's vulnerability to flooding. As the storm raged on, connection with Andrea Gail was lost, leaving their families and fellow fishermen in agonizing suspense. The owner of the Andrea Gail, Bob Brown, made desperate attempts to reach the ship by radio. However, his efforts were met with silence. At 18:15 on the same day, he contacted the Coast Guard to report Andrea Gail as unreported from a fishing trip. He expressed his fears, stating that he believed the worst had happened. There was a lack of recorded communication from Andrea Gail after Tyne's last conversation with the other fishermen, and no distress calls or signals were received. On the 31st of October, a search operation was launched due to the loss of Andrea Gail and her crew. The United States Coast Guard mounted one of the largest search and rescue missions in nautical history. The news of the missing sailing vessel sent shockwaves through the tightly knit fishing town of Gloucester, Massachusetts, as family members and other fishermen waited for word on the crew's fate. The hunt for the Andrea Gail intensified as Hurricane Grace continued to destroy the North Atlantic. Coast Guard vessels and planes searched the seas off the coast of Newfoundland for any signs of the missing vessel. Joined by foreign partners and backed by modern equipment like radar and sonar, they combed the seas steadfastly, holding to hope despite rising uncertainty. Despite the challenging weather and the great length of the ocean, the search teams kept going, motivated by a common desire to offer closure to the missing crew's families and loved ones. They ran through the region where the Andrea Gail was last known to be day and night, checking the horizon for any sign of wreckage or survivors. As the days grew into weeks and months, the hunt for Andrea Gail continued, with each passing day bringing new problems and barriers to conquer. Despite their best attempts, they could not locate the vessel or crew. Andrea Gail and her 6-man team left without a trace, leaving only unresolved questions and a deep feeling of loss. The grief of not knowing what had happened to their sons, spouses, and friends was too much for the families and loved ones left behind to handle. Candlelight vigils were held, prayers were muttered, and tears were shed as the town mourned the death of 6 of its own, who were stolen too soon by the harsh sea. The wreck of the Andrea Gail is yet to be discovered, and no crew members' dead bodies have been retrieved. It would be difficult to know how the ship sank without seeing the ship. The huge storm forced the ship to sink, which may have capsized after colliding with a massive wave. This might explain why no emergency messages were received and a 30-meter wave was reported during the storm. Even the regular 10-meter waves it saw throughout the storm may have caused the ship to capsize or flood. Or it could be the weight of the fuel tanks behind that resulted in the engine failing. It's easy to imagine what might have gone wrong, but the most painful part was that their hard work and time spent sailing those days were just dust in the grave. What do you think about the tragic story of Andrea Gail? Let us know in the comments section below. Stick around for more exciting videos like this. See you in the next video.